Many years ago, this common refrain could be heard. Those who went to Raffles Institution ruled the country, while those who went to Anglo-Chinese school owned the country. Well, there was a bit of truth in that, as many ACS boys went on to become businessmen, while many RI boys went on to become politicians. While that may no longer be the case, schools such as ACS, SCGS, RGS, Nanyang, these are still very much regarded as elite schools that are not easily accessible to the larger population. So when ACS recently announced that its primary school at Barker Road was moving to Tengah New Town and would admit girls too, you can imagine the shock it caused. An online petition called Make ACS Primary Stay in the Same Location has garnered about 3,800 signatures so far. Others went online to say the move would dilute the cultures and tradition of a 137-year-old institution. Some were upset they were not consulted. Many others also felt it was a good move, though, to level the playing field in an increasingly stratified society. Today on Heart of the Matter, that is our meaty discussion. Is this move by ACS the start of something significant? Are we truly starting to level the playing field and reduce inequalities in Singapore? Can we even imagine other schools like Raffles Girls Primary School following suit? Does physically moving to a non-prime estate really make a difference? With me to talk this through are Ian Tan, a communication professional and an ACS alumni.
Hello, thanks for having me here.
Prof. Ting Xiao Si, she's a professor at NIE who has written about education reforms in Singapore schools.
Hi everyone, I'm glad to have this chance to talk to everyone here.
And Clarence Ching, founder of Access Singapore, a non-profit which provides career exposure opportunities to disadvantaged students.
I'm very happy to be here.
All right, thanks for coming in. I think for the sake of transparency and, because of the nature of this topic, we should all first declare which primary schools we went to. Okay, are we comfortable with that? So I'll start first. I went to Nanyang Primary School. Believe it or not, even though, people always say, you mean you can actually speak Chinese? They're a bit surprised. Clarence, what about you?
Henry Park Primary School.
Prof. Ting?
Close to yours? Raffles Girls Primary School.
Okay. Ian?
I went to Anglo-Chinese Junior School as it was known then.
I think it's still known as Anglo-Chinese.
Today it's Anglo-Chinese School Junior.
Okay. Same but different. Primary school education in Singapore, we know it's free. So you can't pay for a spot in a certain school that you want. But when it comes to the whole P1 registration each year, certain schools deemed elite are heavily oversubscribed. Prof. Ting, maybe I'll start with you. Why do we continue to have this obsession with these so-called brand name schools?
I think at first glance, right, people would talk about, because there's this placement priorities for alumni, right, for parents who invest their time and their money through donation, volunteer work and all that. This could be some symptoms of the problem, if you like. It's something that we can see that's more immediate. But if we take a longer, broader perspective of the development of education landscape in Singapore, in the late 80s onwards, right, we will see this promotion of school choice. Some scholars call it the marketization of education. When we talk about school choice, it seems to cater to a diversity of people. But who really have more choices?
Okay.
The options would fall on the parents who are better resourced.
But why these schools? Why are these brand name schools always so heavily oversubscribed?
Because what I was trying to say earlier points to a competitive culture. With the marketization, with the school choice comes school excellence model at that time, which points to school ranking with the school league. And so when you look at these institutional developments, that encourage schools to compete with each other. And these schools, these brand names that you talked about, happens to be those that are very well established with a longer history. They have time to accumulate wealth, accumulate resources, accumulate networks, right? And alumni. People would see them as giving more opportunities to their children.
But as a parent, I'm imagining you would send your kid to those schools because of the inherent benefits that will come with being in that environment.
That as well. The learning environment gives you the resources, gives you the opportunities. I'm sure there are some parents who would say that I am glad I went to this school. I like the values, identify with them. I like the experience I had. I want my children to do the same, right? If these were not branded schools, probably nobody would care about it.
Right.
But because precisely people see them as giving more resources and opportunities, and that's why they're hunkering after it.
Ian, did you send your kid to ACS?
Yes, I have a son and a daughter. My son went to ACS Junior and my daughter went to Quatran Presbyterian, which is actually within 2K of my house.
Okay.
So I'm the sort for convenience. With ACS, it was easy. With ACS Junior, as an alumni, they sent me a letter saying, your son has a place in the school, right? Please register.
Right.
And with my daughter, because there was no option to have an elite school nearby my house, I live in a HDB flat in Bishan. So I just chose the nearest place within 2 km of my HDB block. So
Okay.
I'm not the sort who thinks about my child must go to an elite school. It's just about convenience for me.
So
and my wife.
if you had not been from ACS yourself, your son probably would not have ended up there? Is that what you're
Yes,
saying?
we're gone to the same school as my daughter because it's easier to ballot for.
And you never felt like, oh, I want to get him into ACS. I want to get him into an elite school.
Well, for my son, it was a done deal. So I didn't have to think about that. But I would have done what I did for my daughter is to say, okay, is there a good school nearby? And Quatran is a pretty good school by all accounts. And I was happy to send her there and she was happy to go through the education as well.
Right. Okay, Clarence, let's get your take on this because we know that from many of these schools, it seems that certain types of students end up there. In fact, a Straits Times report in 2015 said that for the top 6 primary schools, only 4 in 10 students live in HDB flats compared to the national average of 8 in 10. Do these schools then become, closed circles and further, I guess, perpetuate that cycle of inequality?
Yeah, I think so. So in ACS, we just recently did a social mobility perception report, and more than 60% of respondents felt that schools are getting more unequal. A huge part of it is also got to do with proximity within the 2-click, and also another point about alumni. So one recommendation ACS gave in the report is we should eliminate phase 2A specifically for siblings with priority as well as parents with priority, alumni priority.
Oh, eliminate it, you're saying.
Eliminate
Get rid
it.
of it altogether.
That's right. So we are saying eliminate it, but if you have served as a advisory committee member or if you have done volunteer work, we think that you need to be eligible because you have put in the hard work. But it doesn't give you grounds just because you're alumni that you're getting in a particular primary school. Specifically for this, only for SAP schools and schools that have GEP. Most schools in this list, we have seen, if you look at MOE data, in 2C, more than 177% are oversubscribed.
Okay.
These schools, these top schools.
And how does removing this phase sort of help level the playing field?
We think that parents should be given the ability to, especially those that may not be so advantaged, to be considered. Because I think at the end of the day, we're living in Singapore and sure, it's a meritocratic society, but it's an arms race, right? The ones that have more opportunities get ahead. And that's the reality of it all. And generally, what we have seen based on our data is students that have parents from elite schools tend to do better in life. Because the careers that they've been in, the social circles, and
Right.
that's why we feel there needs to be a change in the system.
But life is unfair. I'll throw this out to everyone. I mean, sure, every parent will want the best for their child. And if I can afford it, even though I may not earn so much, I will spend on my kids to make sure that they have access to a larger social circle, to different people, to a different network, so that they can up their standing and therefore do better later in life, right?
And that's what my mom did. I don't have any family members, any father or grandfather who was in ACS. My mom went for the high-risk balloting to get me into ACS Junior School back in 1983. She just wanted the best for me.
Yeah, and Prof. Ting, so does that work? I mean, yeah, it seems like we'll never get away from the fact that parents want to give the best for their kids, right?
Yeah, that's true. But if we, as a society, probably we need to think about the 2 values in our pledge, right? Justice and equality. I mean, do we really need to compete so much? Like, of course, we will try to give more resources to our kids, but is there unnecessarily efforts invested into that? That's pretty pressurizing, not just for the kid, for the parents, but also for society as a whole.
I'm going to say something, and probably all my ACS friends are going to be upset with me, but actually ACS is not really that good a school, especially academically. I mean, we've seen it in the rankings. There are many other schools, neighborhood schools, who do better, but yet it is those ties, that brand that want to stick so stubbornly to that, and that loyalty that is inherent in, So, Clarence, how do we deal with something like that?
Yeah, so everyone knows the best is yet to be, right? It's a brand in itself. ACS is an established brand. Also, why I started ACS, a social mobility nonprofit, it's really we see the idea of social and cultural capital building in your formative years. And the idea of when you look at ACS, for example, I think that happens.
Okay, so would we agree that if your kid is in a school like ACS, they have more opportunities later in life? Huh? No.
Okay, so my children have not gone out to work yet. So I can't tell you right now if the ACS boy and the Quatron primary school girl, my children.
Yeah, but
are
Ian, from
going
your
to
own
have-
experience, we all know the friendships we build in primary school. You meet the guy 20 years later, he's the CEO of some company, and you're like, hey, John. And just like that, you're reconnected.
Here's the unique part about my ACS experience, which I would like all the listeners to hear about. I didn't come from a rich family. I love my ACS experience in primary school and secondary school and JC because I met very rich people from rich families, right? And everybody treated everybody the same way. Back in my time, I can't say about now, right? I do not know. In primary school, the rich kids would share toys, would share the small handheld games and so on. It was a true, friendships that you develop, and nobody thought about, hey, this guy has a really big
Yep.
house, right? I mean, we'll go to the parties and wow, the house is nice, right? But and that was it.
No, and fair enough. As kids, we don't differentiate that way,
Yes.
right? I like you, I don't like you. I'll fight with you whether you're rich or poor, you know?
So this opportunity thing, if they came from a well-off family, obviously they will have more opportunities. Well-off people have more connections and they do teach their children better ways of getting ahead in life, right? That is also a social reality. And people who have no access to the higher social strata of society, they may not know a lot of things that these
Right.
guys use to grow their wealth.
But by virtue of being in that environment, you get to mix with them, you get to build relationships with them. And my question is whether those come back to you in the later years because you have had that opportunity to be in that environment. I mean, many parents say, I want to send my kids to those schools because of the social circles they mix it. Is that right, Clarence?
So I came from Henry Park, spent a good 6 years there, and I can state categorically that I think I won't send my kid to Henry Park.
Oh.
Because I think that, yes, precisely because there's social capital, that I think I don't want my kid to be exposed to it because I think it perpetuates elitism at times.
But has it worked against you? Let's say with Access Singapore, your group, and you need funding, you need access to a certain resource. You have some friends that you can call on, right? And you may have built those friendships while at Henry Park Primary School.
So that played a part, but I think that was some time ago. I think now it's completely different. I'll give an example. My parents, both educators, and we lived in Tampines. And my parents worked 2 years to get me in Henry Park. And you have to do the lollipop man thing,
Right.
get the kids to cross the road, and they worked hard. But I can say that right now, it's a completely different ball game. It's very different because it's so competitive. It's an arms race, essentially.
Right.
Because really, it's getting really unequal, in my opinion.
But
I
was
think it
it worth
depends
it?
on the value of the parents now as well, right? Like, if you were to go after this and you're afraid of losing, so to speak, in inverted commas, then you will be subjecting yourself and your kids to a lot of stress, which you may not want. I think you can see this two generations of students, right? One saying that, he could see that kind of social capital perpetuating itself, but then yours didn't because the schools back then was different. It was
Right.
different. So the schools have been, in some ways, become perhaps more insular in a sense. So now the Ministry of Education has been emphasizing this word called social mixing, right? They've been trying to sort of dispense with the different streams, get the subject-based banding to replace it, right? And then trying to do more on social integration in schools.
For the primary schools, a lot of the alumni may not be wealthy people. And I think more the stratification occurs in the secondary schools. So we're talking primary schools here where alumni may be like me, right? Middle class, living in HDB and sending their kids to ACS primary or other so-called elite schools. I've always felt that if the government really wants to do this social mixing thing, we should completely randomize allocations of school slots for kids. Completely randomized,
Right.
right? And that is even better than any recommendation to exclude certain sectors, right? If you do volunteer work. Like, I refuse to do volunteer work. I refuse to. Right? Why should I do volunteer work?
What a
I've got work
horrible
to do.
person you are. Don't want to volunteer. I'm kidding.
Meaning for my
I know,
kids.
I know. For the
For
school.
my
Right.
kids' entry into school. I do
Yeah.
volunteer work with my church friends in real life. But as a parent, when my kids were young, I told my wife, I'm not doing any of this. I've got
Okay.
a job. And I'm not going to wake up early to help people, right, get off the bus and so on, right? Maybe they need more volunteers to do these kind of things, but it should not impact which school he gets into. So completely randomize it. And
Yeah.
that would really address the issue.
In my show Talking Point, we looked at this whole P1 registration once, and that was similar to an idea that was suggested. Of course, there are many other issues that come with that. Like imagine if you live in Tampines and go to Henry Park. That's not really logistically very viable on a day-to-day. But yeah, I guess the question here is that how do we create a more level playing field for everyone overall, right? And can we ever achieve that actually? Is it meant to be, Prof. Ting? Because isn't that the way the world works? It will always be unfair.
Yeah, it will always be unfair, but I think it's our duty and our responsibility to try to give as much opportunities to the disadvantaged families and students as far as possible. And I think we've been talking a lot about like students in top schools or elite schools. I want to point out also that there's been a concentration of so-called disadvantaged students in certain schools. Is that this is a report by OECD. They reported that in Singapore's education system, there's been like 46% of disadvantaged students were in disadvantaged schools. But for them, disadvantaged schools doesn't mean that it's not well-resourced, it's inferior to other schools, but it's mainly because these students come from more vulnerable family, low-income families. So why is that such a thing? Because then it's even more obvious that their insularity would also cause issues, right? Lack of social capital and no exposure to maybe greater opportunities and resources and network. So what do we do about that? Could we redistribute students across different schools, which is what Clarence said?
Are you looking for ways to make your money work harder for you? Or need tips on saving, investing, and making financial decisions? Join me, Andrea Heng, on Money Talks, CNA's top personal finance podcast. From investment basics to the FIRE movement and legacy planning, Money Talks looks at financial trends and stories that matter to you. Check out our complete playlist on the CNA app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us or subscribe for new episodes every Tuesday.
Let's talk a bit about the move itself. So ACS moving to Tengah, is a new area. And I have to say, one of the things I'm very glad to hear is that they're also opening a special needs school, which will be in the same campus, which means I'm hoping that at some point they'll share the same canteen, the same football field, that kind of stuff. And I think that's a start to the kind of integration and social mixing that we're looking at. Any chance that this could backfire, that this ACS moving there will then gentrify Tengah, bring a certain breed of people, or do we see this as something that perhaps in the future other schools could be following suit too?
I think the gentrifying, perhaps time will tell, but although like the property, predictors who are telling you that, the prices will go up and all that stuff, right? But still, it's not just one neighborhood, it's the whole, area that would benefit from this. The idea of practicing inclusion, what does it mean by working alongside or studying alongside with people different from you, who have different needs from you? Yeah. I think that's a very educational experience.
What do you think, Clarence? Is this something that would be in line with your approach? I mean, you deal with a lot of young people nowadays from disadvantaged backgrounds. Is this something that could benefit them?
Certainly, of course. When the news came out, my team knew I was very happy about it. I went on LinkedIn to post it. Well, I think first and foremost, the Board of Governors and ACS, I think they did a fantastic job. So what was known is that they were the ones who approached MOE.
Right.
So that was very interesting. For us, I think it's a fantastic move because ACS, one of the biggest social capital folks, they are moving to Tengah and saying that, hey, we are making a move. It's up to you guys, the rest of the schools, to say, do you want to move out of perhaps the Bukit Timah Street? That's one example, right? So I think it's a fantastic move. For us, we're really happy that it's happening, and we think that this could be a big game changer in social mobility in Singapore.
Do you think other schools could eventually follow suit? Is there any incentive for them to do so?
Potentially, if they have the guts to do it, I think. Especially the Board of Governors, I think it takes huge guts to do it.
What would hold them back, Prof Ting? What would be some of the reasons why schools would not want to take this approach?
There were these discussions about what do we do about elitism? Can we arrange for more social mixing and all that? I think some people were very skeptical, right? They were saying that, schools will never do that. They risk their reputation. They risk their, sort of student demographics and all this. This ACS case shows that if you have a will, you have the resolve, and you can actually do it. And for them, what they valued more is the integrity and the belief in fairness. That was what they felt was ingrained in the ACS culture. And it's that which they should develop further. As you said, we really applaud them for that. And I think maybe other schools could talk to ACS, to maybe try to get them to share their experience to see, what is doable, how did they go about it, maybe that could offer them some tips.
We must remember also that ACS is a Methodist school. It has some religious affiliation, and there's a reason why they may want to reach out to a larger community. Schools like RGS, SCGS, Nanyang, is there any incentive for them to do that? Well, they want to just, remain a bit more exclusive, so to speak. They are purely a secular school to that extent.
It's secular, but you don't need to be. You could still be communal,
Yep.
right? If that is what you value, I think the school leadership, the school board would have to take leadership in this.
I must admit, I had a very colourful journey in my life. I went to Nanyang, as I mentioned earlier. I didn't do well for my PSLE, so I went to the normal stream in Sec 1. I went to Fairview Methodist. Very fortunate, a few teachers took care of me, helped me through. I managed to make it to JC, to ACJC, hence my ACS affiliation. But then I repeated my first year in JC too, Yeah, that's why I tell people I have more friends on social media platforms,
But when you go through such a route, it makes you more resilient.
Yeah.
I have a study with ITE graduates, and existing students, and sometimes I find that they think more about what they really want because they went through a different route. It's not so straightforward, whereas the other sort of top school students, right, for them, they'll be thinking, right, okay, the university is the way to go. Then after that, masters and post. It's like they don't think about other possibilities. Sometimes they don't even explore their own interest. But the ITE students, right, many
Correct.
of them, they would. They have to.
The journey I took, of course, was not one that my parents had hoped I'd taken, but it's true. I learned so much from those experiences. But at the same time, my question is, how many of us as parents today will want our kids to go through that? You will never say, oh, go ahead, please, fail, spend an extra year, learn from that experience, right? Ian, what do you think?
Well, I don't tell my kids what grades they should get. I learned some time back when my kids were younger that each child is different and they'll find their own way. So I don't put any pressure on my kids on what course they should study and so on. We'll talk about it and let them make the choice. But I'd like to just address what two other guests here talked about, the board of governors and the good decision. I'd like to share with you a bit of an inside view from the ACS community. A lot of us are not happy, not with the move itself, not with introducing ladies into the school, right? ACS folks, we're always up for a new adventure, right? We're always exploring all parts of the world and trying new things. So this is not new to us in terms of having ladies, ACJC has had ACS boys and girls mixing for 50 years, right? So what we are talking about within the ACS communities, right, the WhatsApp groups and so on, are things like, hey, they discussed this for a year and they didn't think to have a dialogue with us.
Right.
And were they afraid to have a dialogue with us? Because ACS guys and ladies all love to challenge authority.
Okay.
Right? Or most of us, I wouldn't say everybody. And
You're all
we like
troublemakers, we know.
we like to poke at things, right? We like to find out what's actually happening here. So there's this curiosity that runs through the community, right? And so what we're not happy with, at least some of us, is that, hey, could there have been a dialogue?
Yeah.
Why are you expecting us to be angry with it? Why are you thinking that this is something that we would, object against? Because for alumni whose kids would be going to ACS primary, suddenly now they have to send the kids to Tengah. If the system still exists in 2030, right, for direct admission for alumni, what if they're staying in Tampines, for example?
Okay.
And so are they going to have to move house?
Yeah, so sort of being involved in the process and sort of being given the benefit of the doubt because you sort of assume that people have been upset with this decision. But okay, that is a different discussion because I'm sure they have many reasons for that too. But yeah, with so many things that have happened, if I could just go around now as we start to wrap things up, I guess if we look at this whole move by ACS and we look ahead to the future and we look at the circumstances that we have now, if you had a magic wand, you could do anything. You could change anything, change any policy, change any school rules or whatever. I mean, what would you do to make the learning journey better for our children today?
So I brought it up earlier, but remove alumni priority in phase 2A.
You really think that would make a difference?
I think it will. Because if you are an alumni and you're willing to put in hours, serve on our advisory committee and you will get in. But if it's just by the virtue of you being an old boy or old girl...
Volunteering is not easy to do if you have to have a job.
That's right.
So many of these cases, the volunteers are people who may have the choice to work as and when they please. Again, so it's those who have resources
Yes, we believe that you need to put in hard work. So that's our perspective at Access.
Okay.
We feel that just because your alumni doesn't give you the virtue of that, and this is because of what's been happening in the last decade, which is social stratification. And we're seeing that even more so in top schools. And I must emphasize that this will only be done if it happens in GP schools or SAP schools, which generally are the better schools.
I think we should just remove GEP and SAP altogether. But never mind, that's a whole other discussion. Prof Ting, what do you think?
Actually, right, I always resist pointing to one measure or one program because it points everybody's focus on it, but it doesn't look at things like more comprehensively in the broader perspective. Generally, I would say that if we think that this move, ACS move to Tanga, is like a move towards equity, then I think we should also look deeper at forms of differentiation in our education systems. Diversity is good. It's supposed to cater to a variety of people, but sometimes differentiation in certain aspects, right, leads to stratification. And I don't know whether we figure out which aspects yet. And there can be stratification between schools and within schools. The government has introduced some cooling measures within schools, but between schools, we have a range of schools nowadays. You have one end independent schools, we end specialized independent schools. If you look at MOE's website, you have the other end specialized NT schools.
That's right.
The NT schools, right, after graduation, immediately go ITE. So that means that PSLE, after you diverge, it's going very different ways.
It means once you hit down that road, you're stuck on that road. You can't change. And
Yeah, so unless we can be so sure that, at that point in time, it's like we know your intelligence, or no, maybe it's not about intelligence, but we know your inclinations, right? Unless you, at 12 years old, you can actually determine that. But I think it's very hard to do that.
I would have been a goner. I would have been down some, dead end road, I think. Ian, what do you think?
We think that if students go to elite schools, they're naturally going to do better in life or do better in exams. But it's all down to the teachers. There should be an arms race, and a healthy one, to attract the best teachers to teach in all the schools. People make fun of the phrase, every school is a good school. I believe it can happen, but it has to start with who are teaching the kids and who is truly passionate. I can tell a lot of us parents are very upset when we encounter, or our children encounter, teachers who are not passionate about teaching, or they've been burnt out by the system, burnt out by the curriculum, and many of them become tuition teachers, where it's much more lucrative. So if you want to really help the kids, give them the best teachers. Is it that they're not being paid enough? Is it that they have been weighed down with too much work? Let's think of it from a different perspective. This whole elite school is thinking from where they stay, how much money their parents make. But the kids don't think about that. The kids only think about who's teaching me? And who do I remember when I leave school? The good teachers and the bad teachers. That's what we all remember from our schooling days. We don't think about anything else. We remember who really helped us to get ahead in our studies and later in life, and who were there to just put us down.
And it is so important because I agree with you, Ian. And I think what we want to achieve is to also reignite that joy of learning. I feel that so much of our learning in schools now is just to take exams, Yeah, and the teachers have KPIs, so they're a bit stuck. But yes, there's always those teachers that make that experience special. And as a kid, you remember them. But I also throw in one more and I say, as parents, I think we also have a big role to play to not perpetuate that mindset and to be a bit more chill overall with our kids. Because I think if parents let go, like I refuse to take time off to stay at home during PSLE and say, hey, have you done your assessment? Because I don't think it helps. There are many things we can look at, and I think, we can all agree that this move is something that we can look forward to and hopefully is a sign of more things to come as well. So thank you all for coming in, sharing your thoughts today. I want to say thanks to my guests, to all of you who are listening in as well. We hope you've enjoyed our discussion. Of course, do let us know anytime if you have thoughts on what you've heard. Email us, get in touch with us on social media. We'd love to hear from you. The team behind this podcast is Jacqueline Chan, Joanne Chan, Tiffany Ang, Saya Win, and Crispina Robert. And I'm Stephen Chia, signing off. I'll see you next week.